So, as I was saying at the beginning, this is a link from the Canadian Atheist site that is done by the Canadian Atheists about the official definition of atheist.
Yeah.
So, definitions of atheism and atheists. For the most part, the following definitions are nearly identical, yet...
He's missed the space. He's already off to a bad start.
Oh, yeah. Yet have distinctly separate definitions because maintaining the accuracy of their meanings and uses are important for communicating clearly and accurately. Interesting. So he wants clear and accurate communication. So, right. Remember that.
Well, that's why he uses the broadest definition possible, to make things clear and accurate.
Yeah, of course. You know, like everyone that's not an American is clearly just a Brit, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why both descriptive and prescriptive aspects are covered. Please also see our research references for relevant academic and non-academic sources.
Ooh, we got to look at that.
We do, and in fact, I remember looking at it, and I even called him out on a couple of bits on that, which...
Let me guess, he references the American Atheists and says, look, see, I'm right.
Well, he actually references the Oxford dictionaries and calls it the Oxford English Dictionary, which are two very different dictionaries.
Yeah.
They are actually both run by the same company, but the Oxford English Dictionary is more rigorous and professional, whereas the Oxford Dictionaries is more colloquial. That's the key difference between them. One's talking... I suppose in one way is one saying this is probably the better definition, and this is going, well, this is how people are using the word.
Yeah. I'll guarantee he searched out one that exactly matched what he said and ignored any others that didn't, kind of concur with what he was claiming.
I bet you're right. So here he's got atheism as an absence of belief in deities. So this is one of the things that I find very, very difficult about a definition. To be completely absent of belief in something, you sort of have to have not even heard the proposition yourself. Because when you think about a proposition, you have a cognitive process going on, and you have an answer to it. So you may not have a belief in a deity, but you will either be in a position where you believe something about it, whether it's you're not convinced there is or isn't a deity, or you believe there isn't a deity, or you think the proposition is meaningless or anything like that. So to have atheism as an absence of belief in deities seems almost ridiculous, and also removes pretty much everyone from the table who's actually heard the proposition God exists.
Yeah.
So, linguistic structure. Absence rather than opposition is indicated by the alpha privative a prefix, meaning without. Hence, atheism is therefore concisely characterized as without theism. Now, this is a bit of a misconception as well, because when you consider a proposition, the best way to go about it is to use propositional logic, at least if you want to give a rational answer. Now, the A ought to mean not. A can mean both without and not, but it ought to mean not as in negation. So if the proposition of theism is that God exists, the negation of that would be God does not exist, with a theist believing the proposition of theism and an atheist believing the proposition of atheism.
Well, another thing is he says a means without. But what about the word asynchronous? That doesn't mean without synchronous. It means not synchronous, as in the opposite of synchronous.
Yeah, we actually wrote a post called Synonyms, spelt S-I-N, synonyms, which is the sinful use of synonyms. and talking about how people take these words and they sort of go, well, this one's like this one, and it's like this one, and it's like this one. And one of the ones that I actually did cover off is how the A can mean not or without, and sometimes it doesn't actually change the meaning of the word, whether you're using, without or not, and sometimes it does. This is an example of where it does change the actual meaning.
Yeah, and atypical is another one. Atypical doesn't mean without typical. It means not typical. The opposite of typical. Yeah.
Again, showing logical negation of the initial term. Etymological support. Love this one. The word atheism is derived from the ancient Greek word atheos, meaning godless, or to emphasize it more generally, without deities. Okay, so this is actually not even take into account how the word was actually used. And it basically meant anyone that didn't believe in the sanctioned gods of the state. So even Christians were regarded as atheos, or atheos, however you pronounce it. And Christians then used that term to describe pagans. And all of these people were actually theists. They just believed in different gods to the sanctioned gods. The language has evolved since then. We've found more logical definitions since then. So they're not even taking into account how the word was used. Now, I think it was also Faithless Pheasant that raised, I can't remember what he said, but before it meant anyone that didn't believe in the gods, it actually meant people who were forsaken by the gods. I think, and that was the very, very original use of the term.
Well, you had people like Parmenides who were considered atheist because they questioned the existence of gods. And you had somebody like Socrates who believed in a singular god, but was considered atheist because he questioned the Roman gods and how they came about and whether they existed, or Greek gods even.
Yes. Well, they're pretty much the same, aren't they? Just a rebranding.
Copied from the papers, yeah.
Just going to catch up with a couple of the comments. So Darth Dawkins says, Randolph finally, after I repeatedly questioned him, stated his position necessarily entails the falsity of God. Interesting. He wouldn't admit that to us. He kept on saying, no, I'm just absent of belief. I'm just absent of belief. Don't have to back up what I say at all. So interesting.
I don't have a position on God's existence was what he told me.
Yeah. Randolph wants to define atheism in an ambiguous way so as to insulate himself from having to defend his real position, which is he believes there is no God. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to defend my position and my belief that there is no God. He just runs away from it. He also likes it being overly broad, so he's running a business, essentially. So the more people he can go, oh yeah, you're one of us, you're one of us.
Pay me my annual subscription fee, bitch.
Apparently, though, he's got less than 100 members, and he's approaching 50. Right? Okay.
Well, that's more than me. I've only got one member. Who were?
But what a member, Dave! What a member! Oh, sorry. Onus of justification, aka burden of proof. Oh, we just sort of alluded to that. Since atheism classification is not justified by claims or against theistic or anti-theistic positions, the burden of proof is not applicable in regard to this, although it is certainly possible to have reasons for choosing atheism. Such justification is not necessary. Now, it depends what you mean by necessary here. It's never necessary to justify your position, but to be able to justify your position makes it rational. And every person, whatever their position, once they've considered a proposition, whether they believe it, they disbelieve it, they're unsure of it, or some other position, they should be able to justify themselves, as in explain why they hold that position, to ensure that their position is rational. Then you can have a conversation with them and maybe poke a couple of holes, make a couple of questions. Maybe they'll realise, oh, actually, I hadn't thought of that. And you might end up in a different position, or they might have found more reasons to justify their position, which shows actually it is a rational position to hold.
Yeah. And also, he's done kind of a bait and switch with the burden of proof here, because he's going on about it in the sense of, well, you've made a claim, I've not made a claim, so therefore the burden of proof is on you. But in a conversation, burden of proof doesn't really work like that. If you want to have a productive and progressive discussion, the burden of proof thing isn't a thing. It's not an actual thing. It's, you just justify your position, and if somebody makes a claim and you say, I don't believe you, you explain why.
Yeah, and it is that easy. You know, if you were to say, oh, well, I don't accept the Genesis story from the Bible as a literal telling. Why? And if you go, well, I just don't, that's not a well thought out position.
Yeah, it's not a very good rational position.
No, well, I just don't, because I said so. I mean, shit, how often did we hate our parents when they'd say, go do this? Why? Because I said so. How irate did that make all of us? Yet, we're in debate online, you go, well, I just don't believe you. I just don't believe you. Shut up. Explain yourself.
Yep. Explain. Yep.
Although I realise that sounds a bit contrary, me going, shut up and explain yourself. I meant, shut up with that, I just don't believe you, and then explain yourself in a rational way.
Well, the thing as well is you have all these people going on about how they want less believers and how they want believers to see that their position is irrational. How are you going to do that if all you do is say, well, I don't have to prove anything. I just don't believe you.
Exactly. What's your purpose of debating theists online, or even just having a conversation with them? Are you really just there to go, well, I don't believe you, I think you're irrational, I don't believe you? Is that going to achieve anything? It's one of the reasons I actually quite often prefer having a conversation with a theist online, because as soon as they realise that I'm more up for a conversation than telling them that they're stupid, we have a good conversation. Yes, we operate a different ontological position. Yes, they think I'm wrong about my disbelief in gods, and I think that they're wrong for believing in God. But other than that, we realise we've got a lot of similarities between us. A lot of our morality is the same. We think about a lot of world issues in the same way. And actually, the fact that we do or don't believe in gods becomes a little bit irrelevant to the whole situation. Anyway, I'm going off piste again. Logical consistency. Assuming, I still don't know what that square one's called. The other one that you can use as a replacement's called a tilde, but yeah. Anyway, that's the one I use for not when I'm at a computer. Anyway, is not. And B is believing, and D is deities. Atheism is logically categorized as not believing in deities. Interesting that he's switched to from not to without. But anyway, sorry, the other way around. Which is equivalent to absence of belief in deities. Well, it's not for the reasons I mentioned before.
Bit of a bait and switch, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's also not fully answering a proposition. So I've done a few articles trying to explain how to answer a proposition in different ways. So if you have a proposition such as God exists, there are two options, right? Either a God exists or a God does not exist, or at least one deity anyway. So
well,
you have to... Sorry.
I was just going to say, one thing I'll say about this is that it's not actually logical. It doesn't actually need to be there, the logical notation, because he's not writing it in a way that needs logical notation. He's just put it there to make it look like he understands logic.
Well, exactly. So that's sort of what I was coming to with it. You've got your two options. Now, there are more ways to answer a proposition, but it can only either be true or false. So a God can either exist or not. So what you have to do there is think about your position on God exists. Do you believe it to be true or false? and your position on God does not exist. Do you believe it to be true or false? And that is the bit that you are supposed to answer both of them. Now, obviously, if you believe it to be true, it entails a lack of belief it's not true, and vice versa for an atheist. If you believe it is false, then you also lack belief in it being true. All he's done there is say, well, you lack belief in it being true. But it hasn't told you that what you actually do believe about it. That position right there is just a read of a psychological state that is shared between someone who is an agnostic, they are unsure, they lack belief in it being true and false, and an atheist who, at least in the normative philosophical sense, holds the belief that God does not exist, or gods do not exist. Just going to quickly switch back and see if we've got any more things in the chat. So let's have a look. You should watch your interaction with Randolph on this very issue. Yeah, I can imagine it's quite funny, but also quite painful. It's on MathPig channel video, okay? And OP's here as well. Hey, OP, nice to see you, dude. Can't wait to have you on later. It's definitely going to be an interesting one. But yeah, cool. And apparently, Dar thinks agnosticism is impossible. Interesting. I don't think it's impossible. I do think that we are inclined psychologically to be leaning slightly one way or another most of the time, but you can still be quite decisive. Imagine you are offered your two favorite meals, right? You can have meal A or meal B, and you go, I really like, I don't know which one I want. And you might be swinging back and forth a little bit, and you could argue that, or maybe you've had a bit more of that and a bit more of that way. You're in that state where you're unsure of what you want because actually, both sound good. Now, with agnosticism, you don't think either arguments for theism or atheism are convincing enough for you to say, no, that is definitely the way I lean. That's basically the way I see it. But obviously, an agnostic position, so someone that lacks belief both ways, and an atheist position that believes gods don't exist, but also lacks belief, well, the theist also shares a lack of belief in gods not existing. So to categorize an agnostic as a type of atheist sort of relies on special pleading. Because you're essentially saying that only a lack of belief in gods existing is enough to become an atheist. Well, then that means only a lack of belief in gods not existing is enough to be a theist, which puts that middle position as an atheistic theist or theistic atheist, which is a contradiction. It's impossible it's possible to believe a god does exist and does not exist. So then you have to go, well, actually, only atheists are allowed to be defined by what they lack belief in. And you go, well, you're holding people to different standards. And if that's the case, you're committing a special pleading fallacy. So, as for logical consistency, I think it's fairly safe to say there is none.
Yeah.
Further clarification. For the sake of completeness, and due to the wide spectrum of theistic deity-dependent concepts, including supernatural agents such as angels and demons, which don't qualify as goddesses or gods, atheism may also consequently defined implicitly as the absence of belief in deities and theistic deity-dependent supernatural agents.
Well, those are certainly words.
It's
he likes to sound clever, doesn't he? He likes to use a lot of words that make him sound like, well, I've thought about this rather a lot, and I'm really I've got a very good grasp of linguistics,
Yeah. If you actually start questioning him on it, you realise he's got no grasp at all.
No.
Polysemous variation. So we mentioned this at the start that the term atheism is polysemous. So the polysemous characteristic is a descriptive principle favoring usage that may vary among speakers, and some alternative meanings of the word atheism can occasionally lead to misunderstandings by limiting definitional scope or becoming conflated with other words that are more suitable.
In other words, when you define it, you leave me out of atheism and you leave me out of being an atheist. And I want to be an atheist really bad, so please use my definition.
Now, at the beginning, he said clear and accurate language, didn't he?
He
Now,
did.
there are many types of non-theist. So I know I mentioned the agnostic and the atheist, but actually you can have an ignostic and an apatheist and an innocent and an inanimate object. And these are all different non-theist. I mean, I only throw inanimate objects in there because of Ra's stupid rocks are atheist things that Randolph backed up because it backs up his position here. Now, with a wide scope of any type of non-theist being an atheist, we can't actually infer what someone does and doesn't believe about a proposition. Whereas if we take the specific ontological positions people might have in regards to the proposition, we know that, say, for an apatheist, that they don't really care whether a God exists or does not, so they haven't really considered the proposition. It's not actually fully answering the proposition, it's just telling us what they think of the proposition. And an atheist thinks that the concept of God is so ill-defined that considering it would be completely meaningless. And an innocent is someone like a baby who doesn't have the cognitive faculties to consider the proposition God exists, nor do they have the ability to hold such beliefs either way. So it's ridiculous reducing it to that and saying rocks. I mean, come on, they don't even have mental states. And such a broad definition of atheism reduces it to quite an unthinking and irrational position. Yet, how many of us atheists talk about how logical and rational we are and how we're more rational than theists? Well, what is being rational? Reasoning using the rules of logic and probability theory, holding consistent and coherent beliefs, and a bunch of other things. So, how can equating atheism to, babies being atheists and rocks being atheists and people lacking the cognitive abilities to consider propositions being atheists, showing that we're rational? Is atheism, or being an atheist, a reasoned position or not?
Well, that's the thing. A lot of other atheists who hold to this without God and lack of belief definition also say what a ridiculous argument the rocks are atheist thing is.
This is true. I mean, it's generally considered, even by the lacktheist, that rocks are atheist is ridiculous, because even in most definitions of atheist, it says a person that disbelieves or lacks belief in gods. That's the colloquial Google dictionary definition for it. So even then,
I mean, Rocks can't pay him an annual subscription fee to join the Canadian Atheists, so why is he trying to include them?
That's a very good point. So now he comes on to atheist. So absence of belief in deities. What? Isn't that what he used?
What atheism is?
So, yeah, absence of belief in deities, absent of belief in deities. Okay, so I would say that a better definition of an atheist is one that believes the proposition of atheism to be true. And the proposition of atheism is gods do not exist. But there we go. Sorry.
That's all right. I was just going to... you read this out and then I'll go with it because it's to do with what it says.
Okay. So, linguistic structure, absence rather than opposition, indicated by the A, meaning without, hence atheist, blah-de-blah, not a theist. What? It means without, but not a theist.
Well, that's just it. He's realized how ridiculous it sounds to just keep saying without. He needs to drive home that A only means without. But he's realized how ridiculous it sounds, but to say, I am without theist.
I'm without a theist. Right now, I am without a theist because there isn't one in this house.
Yeah, exactly. So he has to do that bait and switch. It's more concisely characterized as not a theist. So, yeah. I mean, without theist is a very different thing to saying not theist.
Yeah, it is. But then not theist is just categorizing a broad structure of anything that is not a theist.
Yeah.
Again, it's ridiculous. We've already addressed the A meaning negation. So, and the way I see the easiest way to describe an ism and an ism is a concept or a philosophy or something like that. And an ist is a person that ascribes to that particular concept or philosophy. That's a really simplistic way of putting it. So, did you want to cover off what you're going to say?
It was just that about how he did the bait and switch with the without.
Yeah, fair. Again, he's come back to his etymological support about atheos, which we've already covered off. Is his term is wrong.
So which word is derived from atheos? Is it atheism or is it atheist? Do they both come from the word atheos? Or do they both mean the same thing? Are they both the same word?
He hasn't actually explained that at all. It's definitely interesting, but as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter because he's already been shown to be wrong.
Yeah, and everybody loves fallacious thinking.
So he's gone back to justification or the burden of proof. He said the exact same thing he did under atheism. So again,
he's basically just copied and pasted it and forgot to change atheism to atheist in a couple of places.
Yeah,
but we'll make it look like I've written loads, but I've just copied everything.
and it's wrong again.
Yeah,
it is actually. Oh dear. So yeah, logical consistency. No, that's not logically consistent. And he's gone on the whole supernatural agents thing again, and the polysemous variation. Right. Okay. So, I mean, how crap is this? I mean, I've heard plenty of lactheists support lactheism better than this, and this is what he's saying is the official definition of atheism. I'm not sure I've seen a worse argument or understanding for it.
No. I could argue for lactheism better than he did.
Yeah. Now, I can understand. I don't want to tell anyone they can't be an atheist because if they're actually what would normatively be described as an agnostic. I mean, you're free to identify how you like, but there is a better way to describe it. And I've done a few articles about how to answer a proposition in a better way. We covered one off. It was last Thursday, wasn't it, Dave?
Yeah.
You won't believe this. Have we covered off the agnostic atheism one on stream yet?
No, not yet.
Cool. We'll probably do that next Thursday then, because that one talks about the issues when people join the word agnostic with atheist, because that again has a lot of baggage that comes along with it. He talks about wanting to have accurate and clear language, yet he's done nothing of the sort. He talks about logical consistency, and he's not logically consistent, other than the fact that he's copied and pasted from above. So if that's what he means by consistency, yes, he knows how to copy and paste. There you go. Language is descriptive, and logical consistency means I can copy and paste.
Yeah, but he doesn't know how to use find and replace properly, looking at it.
Brilliant. So, going to catch up with the chat quickly before we check out the etymology. Hey, Leon, glad to see you here.
Hey, Leon.
So, agnosticism, upon analysis, is an indirect denial of God. We can be agnostic about many things, however, no one can be neutral towards God. I think that's interesting. It's a shame that Darth actually left now. I'd be interested to know why. Agnostics believe it is not necessary to reference God as the necessary precondition of facts. Consequently, God cannot logically coexist in such a world. That's an interesting claim about what agnostics believe. Now, there are different definitions of agnosticism. Weak agnosticism is basically that uncertainty position between the two positions I was talking about before. There's also hard agnosticism, which is someone that believes the supernatural is unknowable, so we can't know either way. There's also the epistemic principle set out by T.H. Huxley, which was the original use, which was we should not say that we believe or know anything that we don't have sufficient evidence for. So that's an interesting one, because to be epistemically agnostic, you could actually still have a belief one way or the other, but if you realize you can't support your belief with enough evidence, you should hold it back and try and collect the evidence for it. And then obviously there's the colloquial use, which is crap, which is without knowledge, which sort of relies on a bit of an etymological fallacy. So he then says, agnosticism then is an indirect denial of God entailing the falsity of God. Again, I disagree with that for the reasons I just said. Leon says that he's an agnostic and doesn't deny God. Darth says, agnostics do not explicitly deny God, but they do so indirectly. I mean, that's almost going back to the implicit atheism and explicit atheism. But I'd have to disagree with you there, because they would also be implicit theists at the same time, because they lack belief both ways. So, of your argument, but Opie says, I'm aware of your argument, but also Alex Malpass's response. Darth says, Alex Malpass believes that it is not necessary to reference God as the necessary precondition of all facts. This necessarily entails God cannot logically coexist in that world, resulting in the falsity of God. And he's got to go. So have yourself a good one. Sorry I didn't see your message earlier. I was trying to get through that mess. Leon says, didn't Randall say lacktheism was just the lack of a position? Yes, he did. He said it was he was completely absent of a position on God's existing. So, I mean, there's even inconsistencies between the way he describes it, and you would see his definition change slightly, but in his head it was exactly, he was saying the same thing, but the words he was using gave it different meanings. I mean, like we even said here, with the A being without for theist, without theist doesn't make sense, which is why he then realized that and had to change it to not a theist.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and you said that in the chat. I was just reading your chat and going, that sounds familiar. So where was his references? Let me go back up to the top. Research references. Right. So yeah, see here, Oxford English Dictionary and oxforddictionaries.com. That is not the OED. Okay? They are two different dictionaries. I called him out on it, and he still didn't change it. So this is someone that, even when corrected, even if he was to deny my position about how atheism should be the proposition God does not exist, and atheist should be someone that believes the proposition God does not exist to be true, he should at least go and update his references. He's even got the link there. Oxford Dictionaries is not Oxford English Dictionary. Right? Okay, they're called very similar things, but it's not the same. You know?
If he changes it, though, it doesn't sound half as official.
Well, it's because it's not. But I think anyone.
Yeah, yeah, but Oxford English Dictionary makes it sound like, oh yes, this is what the dictionary says. The dictionary of dictionaries says this about atheism. And it sounds better than, well, this is what a learner's dictionary says.
Yeah, but wouldn't you say that's also dishonest?
Oh yeah, but Randolph's as dishonest as a fucking thief.
So
You know,
I just love the fact that his first two there are false.
yeah.
Um, and obviously, dictionaries are descriptive. They describe how a word is being used. And as I said at the beginning, the Oxford dictionaries is more how words are being used colloquially. And especially on the internet, that is how atheism is defined as the lack of belief in gods. In fact, quite often it will say disbelief or lack of belief. Now, that's showing that there is a difference between the two. So, disbelief in the proposition is the same as believing the proposition is false, whereas lack of belief doesn't really tell you what someone does and doesn't believe, but you would usually think that if someone was saying they only lack belief, they lack belief both ways and are holding that agnostic position. But, language is descriptive. So, through common use, that is how that term has become defined. Cool. And what's this? Glossary entry for atheism, the atheist frontier. Let's have a look at that, shall we?
So he used an atheist site to prove what atheism means.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's just
Like,
going
look,
on.
these atheists are using the word the way I'm using it. That means that I must be using it correctly, and that must mean that all the other definitions are incorrect.
Yeah, and hang on. Where did we get the one where he was going on about the other definitions as well? We'll have to go into the polysemy one because that was where he was talking about anti-theists and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We'll cover that off
Yeah, I
briefly.
can't remember where that was.
Yeah, I mean we've got time. I know we need to do a little bit of a setup between our change for when we've got OP on board, but yeah, it shouldn't take too much longer. Yeah, so he's going into using Google Translate in 2013 to get a definition of atheist. Okay, that's not going to tell you how the word was used back then.
Okay, the anti-theism thing is in the etymology section.
It is in the etymology section. Cool. I will cover that one off. The official alt atheism internet news group. Blah de blah. Let's try and find something a little bit, academic in this.
Rational Wiki? Peter Boghossian?
Where's that? Sorry.
The Manual for Creating Atheists.
Interesting. Do you want to have a look at that?
No, that's all right.
Okay.
It'll say the same thing as the lack of belief.
Most of it is just looking at dictionaries, which, as we've said, are descriptive. So
American Atheist.
I love it. I love that American Atheist and Canadian Atheist. So this site that he has used to back up his definition on the Canadian Atheist site, he's also back to.
That almost sounds like you're begging the question fallacy. Circular reasoning.
Oh, blimey. This is encyclopedia. This is great. So we have a look at this one. What? Advanced. Accept risk and continue. That doesn't usually happen when you go back to IEP. No. IEP is usually safe. I wonder why that's come up. Okay, so this is brilliant. So you go straight to what is atheism. Atheism is the view that there is no God. So a view that there is no God means that you believe there is no God. So at the top, it's basically covering off, how they describe someone that does not believe that a God or divine being, or being that it exists, right? But then it clarifies, what is atheism? It clarifies it here. So it gives you a little blurb at the top, and that's basically as far as he's got. He hasn't even read this bit that says it's the view there is no God. So there you go. It just shows that he's looking for bits that he thinks back them up. The Oxford Handbook of Atheism, isn't that the one that we actually looked at? And when you read the rest of it, it tells you philosophical atheism. Yeah. What the hell's that? I mean, we know that as the belief gods do not exist. It doesn't exist. Oh, okay. How funny. He's got a screenshot of it there, though, but it's not going to allow us to read the whole article. He's just going to cut the bit that he wants. Oh, God, the Gnostic agnostic thing. Ugh. Definition, Centre of Inquiry, no. Dictionary, all words. Okay, so the only academic resource that he's actually got in there, really, actually shows that that's not how it's defined in philosophy.
Is he seriously using the Urban Dictionary as a way of proving what a word means? Like, seriously?
Apparently so.
And it's the same reference 3 times?
Sorry? Reference 3 times, yeah.
3 times, yeah.
Oh, no. So
atheism, atheist, and atheists.
Right. What a load of crap. So was it the polysemy one? Where's that? We need to go
etymology.
Back. Oh, it's in the etymology section, was it? So he has included, or not on this bit. We've already gone through all of this, which is how he was talking about how the Greeks used it, but we've already shown that he's not talking about that. Yeah. So although atheism is sometimes assumed to be derived from the word theism, it actually predates it. Originally, the concept of atheism was contributed by the Greeks in 5th century BCE, followed by the words atheist and atheism making their way into the Latin 1501 CE, and later introduced to English in 1553 CE, according to the timeline, or mid to late 1580s, after being adapted from the French words atheisme. I don't know how you'd actually pronounce that. Which, interestingly, was almost 1 century before the words theist and theism were introduced into the English language. So I obviously can't speak for when theism was introduced into it. I've not actually looked at when theism was introduced. But he's wrong about how it was originally used by the Greeks. As we spoke at the beginning, it originally was used for God forsaken, and then became for someone that didn't believe in the gods of the state. You could still have a belief in gods. It might be useful for us to look at when the word theist and theism were actually introduced, although he's talking about specifically the English language, so I imagine there was an earlier use of the word that then was translated later.
Well, the way we use it now comes more from the French version rather than the Greek version.
Indeed. And obviously we talked about how language changes and evolves and how it is descriptive. And what we were talking about earlier with logic and describing how to use the proposition and how the A means not, as in negation, is the negation of the proposition, and it allows for a more logical and concise definition. So you would think anyone that cares about rationality would be using propositional logic to answer a proposition, have that particular definition. So conflation between the a prefix and anti-prefix does sometimes occur, but according to the etymology, they specifically mean different things. Well, of course they mean different things. For instance, the alpha privative prefix a, or an, is still used in Greek words to express negation or absence. So he admits negation there. Interesting. While anti, partially yet also distinctly, in contrast, more actively expresses opposition. The following point form listing is provided as a convenience to reaffirm the meanings of these commonly used prefixes and include a number of helpful usage examples to demonstrate how these particular words are constructed. The A means without, or not. So agnostic, not gnostic.
And I mean, theoretically, if you were translating that, wouldn't it be Gnostic becomes knowledge and it becomes without knowledge? I mean, stick to your systems here, pal.
Yeah, it would. But then again, even if that is how you, it's actually more, I don't know. And when it's not talking about knowledge in that sense. So no can have a few different meanings. So when someone says I know something, they're not necessarily saying I have knowledge. They sometimes are meaning that they have information. And when someone says I don't know, it can sometimes mean I don't have the information or I'm uncertain, rather than talking about a lack of actual knowledge. So what he's using there doesn't really work. The way agnostic is used in the weak agnostic sense, so when you're answering a proposition, that's the one you'd usually use, is you're uncertain whether the proposition is true or false. You don't know. You don't lean either way. Amoral without morals.
Yeah, see, one thing I'll say for this one is this shows why an etymology can't get us to usage. Because colloquially, we might say somebody without morals is amoral. But it can also mean not relating to morality. So if you think of whether standing in the rain is moral, it's not, it's amoral. It doesn't relate to morality.
Drinking a glass of water.
Yeah, it's an amoral action, but that doesn't mean that it's you're without morals because you're drinking water. It means that it doesn't relate to morality.
And actually, there are better terms, aren't there, like non-moral and unmoral.
Yeah, I mean etymology can't get you to usage most of the time.
No, and you should really look to the field that you're discussing in. So if you're discussing beliefs or morality, these are philosophical concepts. So maybe look to the experts in the field rather than etymology and colloquial use. Because, well, if you want a better use or a more professional use, anarchy, anarchy without a system of government. Apolitical.
I actually don't know that one.
Sorry?
I actually don't know that one, so I can't really comment about that.
Yeah. Apolitical, not political, atheism, not theism. Okay, so he's changed it again. He said it was without theism before. But then he's then gone not believing in any deities. Now, the not there, again, just to hammer this point home, is supposed to be about negation of theism. So the proposition gods do not exist or deities do not exist. The prefix anti means against or opposed, opposite, and is generally active. Anti-authoritarianism, against authoritarianism. Counterclockwise, opposite direction to clockwise. Okay. Counter is synonymous to anti, right? Antimatter, the opposite of matter. Okay. Antimicrobial, against microorganisms. Typically in a destructive sense. I'm not sure on that one. Anti-theism, the opposite of theism. No.
Well, it means opposed to theism.
Exactly. You're against theism. It's not the opposite of theism, but it can be used in a couple of different ways, can't it? It's some people take it as far as they believe no one should believe in deities, whereas others take it in a more secular approach. They think that they're politically anti-theist. They think that theism should stay in its little hole and not influence society.
Yeah, there was a terrible bait and switch in equivocation that he did there at the end, like really bad. And I mean, if you think of that, think of Christopher Hitchens. Most atheists today kind of worship Christopher Hitchens. They'll say they don't, but think of how many times you see, oh, anniversary of Christopher Hitchens' death, Christopher Hitchens' birthday memes kind of going on. Christopher Hitchens considered himself an anti-theist because he was opposed to theism and the belief in gods. It
And
wasn't.
he actively spoke out against everyone and ridiculed them for it.
Yeah. So if you took this and listened to Christopher Hitchens' words, there would be a disconnect there.
Yeah, most definitely. I find that an incredibly interesting one, because by his definition there, we're technically anti-theists, and that's ridiculous. I mean, we hold the belief there are no gods, but we're not against people believing in gods.
No. And is anti-abortion the opposite of abortion? So is having a baby having an anti-abortion?
That would be what it would. Oh, here we go. Antonyms. Although atheism and theism can be regarded as opposites, this requires misusing the word theism in a non-standard way that's categorically passive. This colloquialism is known to persist in some limited social circles and unfortunately seems to survive mostly due to a few infamously erroneous dictionary definitions. Okay, so this is actually, he's being prescriptive with his use. He's saying all dictionary definitions other than the ones he likes are wrong, and he fails to understand how the word has been defined throughout the years. And oh, this is painful, Dave.
Also, how can a dictionary be wrong?
No, it describes how people are using it.
Yeah, it's literally impossible. I mean, I can give you an example of how you could argue that a dictionary can be wrong. Halal. In the dictionary, it's usually, or Western dictionaries, it usually refers to the Islamic method of slaughtering meat, that kind of thing.
Mm.
But halal in Arabic and in Islam actually just means permissible. So drinking water is halal. So you could argue that the dictionary is wrong because it's not how the Arabs are using it, but that's not what dictionaries are for. They describe how the words are being used in that language.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know that one, so thank you for that. But yeah, dictionaries are not wrong.
They can't be wrong.
No, they're telling you how words are currently being used. I mean, like
Yeah, they can
wicked.
be out of date, but they can't be wrong.
Sorry?
They can be out of date,
Oh, yeah.
but they can't be wrong.
Yeah, definitely. So he could make an argument that some of the dictionaries are out of date because he thinks that that's not the way the word is used, but actually it is. I mean, it's still the normative definition within philosophy. It is the most logical definition that, you know, atheists believe that there are no gods, that atheism is the proposition gods do not exist. You know, that is the most logical and sound definition. It gives you a clear and concise position, which is what he says he wants, yet he then goes, yeah, let's have really clear and concise language, except let's make the definition and so broad and vague it's pretty much useless.
Well, the other thing as well is in most places in Europe, an atheist is still somebody who believes God does not exist.
It's true. And in fact, when you talk to a lot of Americans who are not necessarily so busy online and they're from the more northern states of America, they will say that they didn't hear of the lack of belief definition of atheism until they came online and heard it.
Yeah.
So even in America, where this lack of belief definition is quite big because of places like the AA and the battles that Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Ra do in Texas, they have made this quite a big definition and it has spilled out onto the internet. Um, but even then, so his claim of limited social circles is actually closer related to his definition. It's just one that's spilled out onto the internet and people pick up on the internet and start using. Like even when I started talking online, people told me, in all the atheists, no, it's only this, no, it's only a lack of belief, it's only a lack of belief. So I was like, oh, okay. And I went along with it for a while because that's what all the atheists around me were telling me what it was. And I thought, oh, well, I'm new to the online debate, so maybe I was wrong before. So cool, I'll use their use. And then you spend some time thinking about it and talking to people who actually know what they're talking about, and you go, yeah, okay, well, I guess I was wrong by changing. I was originally right. And thanks to an ad populum, which is essentially why I changed the definition in my head, because all the other atheists were saying it, I changed my definition to only a lack of belief as well. And that is pretty much the only thing that really this lack of belief definition is based on. The fact that that's what other atheists, especially on the internet, are using it as. There is no real decent logical grounding in that definition. You're basically taking words that already exist and getting rid of them. They've got rid of the agnostic position and say there's no agnostic middle ground. They get rid of the word non-theist and go, no, all non-theists are atheists. And you're like, right. Quickly going to have a look at the chat, see if anyone is on there. So, Leon says, I really hope he realised once he made that statement just how flawed it was. He didn't. We tried to explain it. So that was talking about the statement about how he didn't have a position. Yeah, he didn't realise that. And as I tried to explain it to him, he decided to block me. Darth is back. Hello, welcome back. Randolph conveniently left out numerous reference sources, including philosophical dictionaries and encyclopedias. Yes, and the only philosophical reference that he actually put in there that I saw through my quick skim actually didn't back up his definition at all. So,
in about 2 paragraphs, I can prove just how fucking stupid he is.
Excellent. I can't wait. Just got one more message from Leon. Is Rational Wiki a sound site? I don't use it myself, but I've seen it cited before by my mutuals.
It has a bit of a bias.
It does. The way I see sites like Rational Wiki and Wikipedia, they're a great way to get your toe into a subject. They're generally not written by professionals. They are written, and they're publicly edited as well, especially Wikipedia. So if there are enough people who think a certain thing, that will be what it is. So again, it's a bit like a dictionary. It's not going to give you a normative definition. It will give you a common definition and any links that back up the common definition only. We could try and edit that and actually include other sites, but it would probably be a rejected edit because enough people would complain about that edit, or people would try and delete the edit, and so on and so forth. As Dave says, there is a bias with them. So, pairing anti-theism and antonymically, is that how you say that?
Well done.
With theism is more accurate because these two words represent positions that are both actively held and diametrically opposed with reasonable consistency. Hang on a second, Dave. Why is the dyslexic reading stuff out on live?
I'm lazy.
For an additional perspective, consider that walking forward and walking backward are diametrically opposed activities. The inaction of not walking is, however, not diametrically opposed to walking forward or backward specifically, although it can serve as a passive opposite of walking in all directions. In summary, atheism compares in the same way to actively held positions of theism and anti-theism, as well as deism and pantheism, etc. What?
More words, and they certainly are words.
So deism and pantheism are forms of theism. That you wouldn't regard them as classical theism, but theism broadly defined as anyone that believes in at least one god exists. So they are types of theist. Fuck it.
Well, this next paragraph proves just how little he actually fucking knows.
Deviations. An extended usage was applied just prior to 500 BCE to categorize atheism as a position specifically opposed to the existence of deities, also known as anti-theism. What? This was most likely due to its popularized use in debates about religion, primarily between Christians and Hellenic polytheists. Some were adversaries accused each other of being atheists as if it was something unacceptable, perhaps in the absence of more suitable vocabulary like anti-theist. Hence, atheism may have been used as a generalized stand-in amidst a less evolved language from ancient times. I mean, that's sort of what we said about how atheist was originally used.
Yeah, but also there were no fucking Christians in 500 BCE.
Yeah.
There were no fucking Christians in 500 BCE. So how could it have come about between debates between Christians and Hellenic polytheists? He's a fucking idiot.
Yes, 500 years before Christ adorned the earth, there were Christians. What?
Yeah. He will literally say anything to try and prove a point. Doesn't matter whether it's right or whether it's factual, but it sounds clever. Atheists will agree with me, so I'll just go ahead and fucking say it.
Oh, this is painful. Roughly 2,000 years later, during the 1570s and 1580s, the word atheism was introduced into the French language. Shortly after that time, the word atheism became part of the English language over the next 5 to 10 years, and long before theism was added to the vocabulary, which disagrees with the seemingly logical assumption that the word atheism is dependent on the word theism.
Yeah, but if atheism means without gods and theism means belief in gods, then how did atheism come about before the term theism?
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I need to look that up and see if we can actually locate when the word theism was originated from. I mean, is there a decent site for etymology that at least has the history of words, like etymology online? I don't know how good it is. Etymology online. I mean, this is obviously just going to have a quick. I did click on that. So theism. So where does it actually come from? 1670s. And when did he say it came in? It doesn't actually have the histories of theism. So even here, though, opposition to belief in God or gods. So that's saying they're opposed to people believing in God or gods for the anti-theism one. So it's at least closer to how anti-theism is actually used instead of his one. But it doesn't actually have the history of it there. History of the word theism. So it came from the Greek theos, and then it hit the 17th century. So there you go. and that's how atheos came about. So theos and atheos, that was in my head as well, because I remember looking into this when I was doing my article with about Aaron Ra, but I just couldn't remember off of the top of my head what it was. And yeah, it comes from the Greek theos, and atheos was the opposite, and so you then have to look at the use of them. So yes, theism might have come in the late 17th century, 1670s, as we saw on that previous site. But again, he's missing it. So even if the word atheism came in from that French word and it hit the English language before theism might have done, it still had a root further. And even still, even with everything he adds, I mean, the person who was the first atheist, Kaizen or whatever, the first person to use the word atheist said it meant that he believed gods do not exist. So that's going back to the first atheist. Again, that was something I looked up in that article against Aaron Ra, where he had a little paragraph. And you know what? There have been people who, throughout the years, who have described different types of atheist, but it's been realized that there are more logical and specific ways to treat the language. Because again, we want clear and concise, and accurate communication. So again, we're back to, okay, so words have been used in different ways. Words are used in different ways. We don't use atheism in the same way that atheos was used. We don't talk about it as someone that is God-forsaken or someone that doesn't believe in the gods of the state anymore. We talk about it in the terms that someone believes that gods do not exist. Or, as some people do, someone that lacks belief in gods. So, I mean, they're two common uses. They're the two main uses of atheist and atheism. But, if you have a look at the way it's done logically, and you consider a proposition using propositional logic, you'll realize that it's a much clearer way to communicate your position. And I don't know why people who only lack belief are so averse to being called an agnostic. I'm agnostic towards the proposition God exists. What's wrong with that? Nothing. It's a perfectly rational position to hold as long as you can justify it. Sorry, Dave, I interrupted you there.
Oh, no, you didn't. I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this and going, really? Oh, I'm clicking on the wrong screen. I keep doing that. In the 1900s, people gradually began to identify themselves as atheists to more clearly and accurately indicate that they were non-believers in deities. As the onset of an increasingly literate and better educated populace permeated in tandem with the advancements of growth of modern civilization, in part to the Gutenberg Press, the wider acceptance of the distinction between atheism and anti-theism resulted. Except we've just shown that the way people use anti-theism, even on etymology online, and the way Christopher Hitchens used it, and the way other people use it, is not the way you say it is. And as for education, you're getting your education from dictionaries and Rational Wiki. And you didn't even read the only philosophical reference when it doesn't back up your position. So, yeah, great. Well done. Since conflict due to much variation of these two words, atheism and atheist, still persist between dictionaries, glossaries, and encyclopedias, it's reasonable for the sake of accuracy to therefore consider the origins and etymology of the words in question. In the case of atheism and atheist, it appears that the meanings began to deviate from naturally impartial classification to an anti-theistic position. But now that the meaning of the word anti-theism is so widely understood, this deviation can be more conveniently rectified. But it's only sites like yours that actually define it that way. So,
Also, would it have been naturally impartial if it was used to describe Christians in fucking 500 BCE?
Linguistic recovery. The words atheism and atheist presently appear to be on course for a full recovery, albeit slowly, because it can often be difficult to see the forest for the trees, whilst in the throes of the gradual evolution of anything. And language is no exception. Yes, we can see from your site.
Okay. But if it's going back to what it originally was, wouldn't that be devolution rather than evolution?
Yeah. With the advent of the internet, access to information, along with the profound freedom to publish literally any ideas, has led to more meaningful, albeit uncomfortable at times, forms of truly open and honest discourse that serve, incidentally, as the driving pinnacles of process. Or, as we can see, it's also led to a ton of misinformation. You've got people like David Wolf spreading flat Earth, and you've got QAnon, as you've said. You've got people like the American Atheists and the Canadian Atheist Club who actually spread misinformation because they're doing it to benefit themselves rather than treating people as logical and rational thinkers. And people do just accept certain people, especially people with big names like Aaron Ra and Matt Dillahunty, at their word, and they don't think about it any further or contest them all that much. So yes, you've got access to information. You've got more access to more information. But actually, as you mentioned, the freedom to publish literally any ideas, aka you can have a hell of a lot more misinformation than information. In fact, there will be more misinformation than information, because if you can publish any idea, there could be one thing. So, for example, if I say that this is a pen, and it goes click, right? There you go. This is a pen and it goes click. Now, someone could publish saying, no, it's a spanner. And someone could publish saying, no, it's a mug. No, it's something else. Oh, my tea went all over me. Wonderful. But someone can actually publish literally anything. There's only going to actually be one correct thing. Now, with language, it's slightly different because language is descriptive and there are lots of different ways things can be described. What you do by saying other uses are wrong is wrong. You're being prescriptive. Technically, any use is a valid use, but your use is less sound. It doesn't follow. You change the words to suit your needs. You find references that agree with you. You don't even address, in the 2 pages that we've read, how it can be used other ways. At least when we do an article, we say, look, atheism can be defined this way or this way or this way. In fact, Dave's got an article about defining atheism in all the different ways it can be done, and also defining atheism in Greek antiquity, if you want to look that up. So there's 2 articles. Just search for answersinreason.com Rockin' Atheism, and it's article 2 and 3 from the series. So he's genuinely just a bit of a dishonest guy.
And just to show you I know more than him, I don't mention Christians in 500 BCE. I mean, he talks about the freedom to publish literally any ideas, and there he is proving the point by saying Christians existed 500 years before they existed.
In fact, Christians didn't even technically exist in 1 AD.
Like 30 AD minimum.
Yeah, and that was a small group of them. I don't even know if they had the name Christians at that time. But yeah, so we're looking at 30 AD being possibly the earliest there would have been anybody that might be categorized as Christians, but probably don't have the label yet. It's not until you see it in the post-literature, as people have written these ideas down and gone through the translation and they're followers of Christ, therefore they must be called the Christians. Oh my God, it's absolutely painful to read this crap. I find that exhausting. I don't know how I'm going to handle this conversation with Opie, because my mind has melted. I'm going to have to go get myself another cup of tea, and if I'm not careful, a whiskey.
Yeah, I could do with one, and I need to drag the laptop down. Yeah. So if we take a break for a little bit and then come back in, and we can have an actual decent discussion with Opie.